Space, the final frontier. These are the podcasts of the podcast Enterprise. Its only mission to explore story structures, to analyze our favorite characters and plot lines, to boldly talk about what everyone has seen before. Hello and welcome everyone to Podcast Enterprise, where we take watch Star Trek the original series episodes and then later dissect them for story structure, likes and dislikes, the analysis, the four-act structure, and the whole 9 yards. I am Bala Ramudurai, and with me I have my host Parvati Ramkumar. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode Obsession. Yes.
This really intense episode. Let's have the summary first, Parvati.
When Obsession opens, you find Kirk, Spock, an ensign called Rizzo, Leslie, and a security guard. They are down on planet Argus X carrying out a survey for Tritanium, a substance harder than diamond. They are surveying the planet for this material. They actually find this material, and while they are doing this, Kirk notices that there is some sort of a smell in the air. It's a sickly sweet. It smells a bit like honey, and Kirk freezes because he recognizes the smell. He knows the smell, and he has smelled it somewhere in the past, somewhere on the other side of the galaxy. So he sends the red shirts to examine this scent and find out where it is coming from. And he also tells him that if they find a sort of gaseous cloud, to fire at it, because that is the source of the smell. The red shirts, including Rizzo, find this cloud. But before they could fire at this gaseous cloud, it attacks them, it kills them, and it drains all the red corpuscles of their body. So they're basically white colored. Rizzo is alive just barely. He's taken back to the ship. McCoy gives him a lot of blood transfusions to keep him alive. Kirk wants Rizzo awakened so that he can question him. Kirk has some sort of an obsession because of this creature, and this is because of something that happened in his past. And when Rizzo is awakened, he describes the creature and then promptly dies. Kirk also has a problem because he has to rendezvous with the USS Yorktown, take in some vaccines and deliver them to a faraway planet. And those vaccines are perishable. If they don't get them to this planet on time, it's going to be a real disaster. But Kirk is too preoccupied with this cloud to do any of that. He's delaying. He wants to remain in orbit around the planet Argus X so that he can find out more about this creature. But scans show nothing. As time goes on, Kirk gets more obsessed with it. Finally, this creature leaves the planet's orbit, goes into space. Kirk wants to follow it. He goes on warp 8 until the engines are about to explode. He slows down, and the creature also slows down, turns back, and Kirk orders for this creature to be fired at using the photon torpedoes, but they go right through the creature and it begins to advance on the ship. Now, the problem here is that there is a certain character, Ensign Garrowick, that Kirk has been constantly and continuously berating throughout this episode. Ensign Garrowick is made to feel guilty for a certain event. He is so upset that in his room he throws a plate onto a certain ventilation system control and the control jams. The creature finds an opening through that ventilation control. It enters the ship, and Kirk has a problem because the creature can kill 200 people at a time. He knows this because the last time he encountered this creature was 11 years ago when he was aboard the USS Farragut as a young officer. It was the same creature at the other end of the galaxy that attacked the USS Farragut, attacked everybody else aboard the ship except Kirk, who survived. Killed them. That was about 200 people it killed at one go. So this is why Kirk has an obsession with this creature. This thing is inside the USS Enterprise, and orders that the radioactive waste be flushed into the ventilation systems. They have only about 2 hours left of breathable air. And finally, they managed to get this thing out, and it's moving towards a certain place, Tycho 4, which is where it originates, and that is also where the USS Farragut was attacked. Kirk orders the ship to go there and find this creature and use an antimatter blast to attack it, because this creature is apparently made of some unknown material called dikironium. So they go there, unleash an antimatter blast, and Kirk, a feat of heroism, they destroy the creature and come back to the Enterprise, and finally Kirk has some measure of peace of mind. Back to you, Bala.
In the 4 act structure, we start with the teaser where we are given a glimpse of what the concept is going to be. So we find the cloud of whatever it is, the creature, come up there when they're actually looking at the glittery rock. And the order that the red shirts are going to fire at it, the red shirts, all of them die at the end of the teaser. All of Kirk's predictions have come true. They should look for dikironium, which they do. And there's also another conflict that is given in the teaser itself, which is that the Yorktown Yorktown, which is another spaceship, I guess. The Yorktown is expecting the Enterprise to dock with them in less than 8 hours, so that there's a shipment of vaccines to be delivered. And of course, at the end of the teaser, we find that all the red corpuscles in the red shirts, they are gone. First act starts with all of them personnel who are on the planet. They were all evacuated, and there's a lot of blood transfusion going on. He's the only one who's alive in the red shirt party, so not much hope is there for Rizzo, is what McCoy says. Theta 7 is what they keep talking about. So there's Yorktown, there's Theta 7, there is vaccine, there's emergency, there's lives depending on it. All that is introduced to us again in the first act, and many times over in the entire episode also, about the danger of not delivering the vaccines. Kirk seems to be very disturbed by this creature. He's the only one who seems to think this is a creature and not some phenomenon. And they come across who's the new security chief. He is the one who's going to be working with Kirk in order to find out what this creature is all about. So they beam back aboard to the planet, and putting a spanner in the works for their Yorktown plan. So that's not happening because Kirk wants to stall some more time and find out or kill the creature. So at the end of the first act, one more red shirt is dead and one red shirt is critical. That's three red shirts down and one red shirt critical. And second act starts with some backstory about Mrs. Farragut, where James Kirk was a young lieutenant. So USS Farragut had Kirk in that situation, that when he came across a cloud, he froze for a second, which is revealed in the second act. We find out that Kirk is very severe on Garrowick because he froze for a second, because which is exactly what Kirk also did in his face to face with the creature back when he met the creature for the first time. And 200 crew, including the person whom he looked up to, which was Captain Garrowick, who happens to be this Ensign Garrowick's dad.
Yeah.
So we find that it's all getting very intricate and sort of intertwined. The creature, US Farragut. We can see that the creature now, which was confined to this planet, started leaving the orbit of the planet. Now, in the second act is also when Spock and McCoy find that Kirk is obsessed with the creature, and that's making him emotionally and physically probably not fit enough to be the captain. Spock and McCoy are not quote unquote ganging up on Kirk. However, it's their professional opinion that he is jeopardizing lives in Theta 7 and Yorktown. That's not going to fly with Starfleet, is what their opinion is. Since the thing is leaving orbit and Kirk is now hell bent on destroying the creature, the USS Enterprise has to follow. And
Yes.
third act starts with Scott pleading with Kirk to slow down because they're at warp 8 and the cloud thingy is going really fast, much faster than the USS Enterprise can possibly reach. That's where it starts, third act, with the fact that they're hot in pursuit of the cloud thingy. And by the end of the third act, I didn't even see the third act end and the fourth act start. I had to refer to Memory Alpha to find out where the third act ended. Turns out that the creature is back in, not on the planet but on the USS Enterprise. It
Yes.
seems to
Yes.
have gotten into. and it somehow left the Enterprise with just 2 hours of air, and there is one person dead on board because of this reason. So they're trying to contain this creature. The fourth act starts with the briefing room scene again, where Spock now confirms that this has to be an intelligent creature because it turned an attack. Kirk has been saying this all along, but through purely intuition and no facts or data. And now it's scientifically confirmed by Spock that it is indeed a creature. And now they're trying to see how to purge this creature from the Enterprise so that they can see how to destroy it later on. Because of this purge with the radioactive stuff, they know that it's susceptible to antimatter explosion. So they rig up an explosion. But the tricky part is that how do we get this? Why it's suddenly left, mysteriously left, because of all the negative pressure, I guess. Not before it attacks Spock. That's what happened somewhere in between the fourth act. And now they have to bait it so that they can make it sit on the anti explosive device. But while doing so, they need to steer clear of it because the explosion can be harmful and can actually suck out the atmosphere, and it's going to be dangerous for whoever is plans to be there to detonate the explosion device. So a whole bunch of edge of the seat stuff, and Garawi, Kirk. There's a fist fight, and at the end of it all, the creature is dead. However, there is still last few seconds where again this edge of the seat stuff where we're wondering whether the landing party Garavik and Kirk are going to be back or not. And eventually they do make it back with Spock's wizardry on the transporter with cross circuiting A and cross circuiting B. And they do end up back on board with Garavik and Kirk and McCoy, Scott, Spock, all of them having a lighter moment at the end of the episode. So that's the end of the fourth act and end to this wonderful episode. So, Parvati, what did you think
Yep.
of Obsession?
Yeah, this is an episode where I watched it the first time a long time ago and I didn't quite get it. It wasn't my favorite episode at that time, but on rewatching it, it's pretty intense. It's very interesting and I really, really enjoyed it. And I found it so intriguing that Kirk was so completely obsessed with something that cannot be caught, it cannot be attacked. You can't even see it most of the time. The only indication that it is coming at you most of the time before it makes an actual appearance is that sickly sweet honey type smell. It was very frightening, and it's also a sort of vampiric type creature because it drains out all the red corpuscles. But it didn't have luck with Spock, which is humorous in some way because Spock's blood is green, and this poor creature decided to eat him, and it couldn't. So it's yeah, that was a very interesting part. I also thought Attack of Kirk's was so frustrating to watch. It was realistic and intense because Kirk was trying to make him feel guilty. He wanted him to take responsibility for waiting for that split second to fire at this creature. And Kirk was, in many ways, blaming Garrick for the deaths of two of those red shirts. It isn't actually Garrick's fault. And the problem here is what Garrick did brought back a lot of bad memories for Kirk because that's exactly what he did on the USS Farragut 11 years ago. Kirk was also blaming himself, thinking that because he didn't fire at this creature for that, and because Garrick's behavior seems to bring out trauma in Kirk and memories of the USS Farragut. Kirk believed up to a certain point in this episode that because he hesitated to fire 11 years ago, the creature killed 200 people on board the USS Farragut, including Garrowick's father. So it's a complex plot, I thought, and very interesting. What did you think, Bala?
Yes, I think it brought out layers of Kirk's character that we knew about, we had suspicion, but it sort of brought to the surface this guilt coming out in that scene where he interrogates Garrowick to unearth his mistake. He knew that this is what he went through and this
Yeah.
is what he did, and this has to be the case. It sort of made him admit of that. I don't think it was more than a second. It was that thing. He knew what he was looking for, but however, in spite of all that, the preparation, he probably froze for, I don't know, 500 milliseconds, and he fired a couple of shots, but still it is Kirk who had to make some villain out of this situation. He put Garwick right where he wanted him to, because
Yep,
he said, and
exactly.
again this is also shown in the Captain Baylock Facerius episode. What is it called? Carbomate maneuver,
The,
in which there's Lieutenant Bailey, I think his name is,
yep,
again pushes him to the brink. So he
yes,
is very unkind to these ensigns who cannot take the heat. So Bailey is one first victim, and this is the second one where he sets such high standards. This shows complex layers of Kirk's character. So that's the best part in this episode for me.
yep. I think he is also trying to atone for his mistake by taking it out on somebody who reminds him of himself. And
Mm,
Ensign Garrowick, I think, in many ways reminds Kirk of what he did so many years ago. And there's that trauma also of watching this creature, 200 people, including the captain he admired on the USS Farragut. So he's trying to basically get rid of the guilt that he has because Ensign Garrowick reminds him of so much of himself. He's trying to teach himself a lesson. He's projecting quite a bit. Uh, he's very hard on the young man and he can be extremely unreasonable, particularly when his mind is fixed on something, as it was in this episode. He is so completely obsessed with destroying this cloud creature. He doesn't see reason. It's disturbing to watch because he can't reason with a man like that. He's wrapped up in his own thoughts, and as you see, well, he's also very, very short tempered in this episode. He snaps at
mm,
just about everybody. So it humanizes Kirk.
mm. Yeah, I agree with you that Kirk involves everybody in at least getting their opinions. Of course, his decision is always
Yep.
his. He involves
Yep.
everybody in the decision making process, and then
Mm.
finally takes a decision and stick to it. Here,
Yes.
he took the decision, and
Ah.
whenever somebody had something contra to say, he would snap at them. He would just say,
Yes.
shoo them off, or throw rank at them. At one point, even says conspiring, and of course,
Ah.
immediately
He does.
realize he realizes that, oh my god, I shouldn't have used the word conspiring. Here it's revenge game that he's playing with the creature, saying that, hey, you took away my favorite captain, I'm going to get
Mm.
back at you. He's aware of it also, that it could mean that destruction of his own career. His career, his well-meaning friends, his position, his favorite starship, all
Yep.
that is in jeopardy, and still that doesn't take him away from pursuing this creature and trying to destroy it.
He yes, not only killed his favorite captain, it also killed 200 people. I think that means it does have some sort of extraordinary power, and I felt that it probably scares Kirk on some level because if it does the
Mm.
same thing to the Enterprise, then you have over 400 people dead. It may be that they have to deliver these vaccines before they perish, and the vaccines have a limited shelf life, and he knows that. But at the same time, the fact that this creature is so efficient with its killing scares him, and he has to do something before it actually gets into the Enterprise, which it does.
So he's, in fact, at one point he says, okay, yeah, if you
Yeah.
lies, you'll lose. I'm going to take care of this creature, which has taken away so many lives already. He's so
Yes.
worried about the past that he's
Ah.
not looking at the future in a rational manner.
Yep.
He's not looking at the call of his duty the way that he normally does. So
Yep.
he's completely in it, and he's not able to get himself out. He's not able to do that.
It preys on his mind to an almost frightening level because he's completely wrapped up in his thoughts. Otherwise, he wouldn't say that Spock and McCoy are trying to conspire against him. He's so wrapped up in his thoughts. He snapped at Chekhov, he snapped at Uhura, he's constantly sniping at Garrowick. He loses his temper with Spock, he loses his temper with McCoy. And it's,
And Chekhov as well.
yeah,
Chekhov doesn't
and
show
Chekhov,
his face a
absolutely.
lot there, but he does get snapped at also.
Yeah, everybody, anyone who crosses his path gets his head bitten off because Kirk is just so highly strung. He snaps at Scotty. The creature leaves the planet's orbit, it goes into space and it's moving at very high speeds, and the Enterprise cannot keep up with it. But Kirk will not allow the Enterprise to slow down. It has to continuously go at warp 8, which is dangerous both for the ship and the crew. But he doesn't see reason until the very end and tells the ship to go back to, tells Scotty to take the ship to warp 6.
I like the fact that there's still some semblance of balance in him because he didn't do a Matt Decker on the ship. He could have continued with this warp 8 for till he just about caught up with the creature, but he
Yes.
didn't do so. He said reduce it to 6. Several places he does show that he has that thing still remaining. He's not completely gone to the other side. For example, when Spock and McCoy have this thing filed on him, they want to say that their commanding officer is not fit for command. McCoy says, "We are not trying to gang up on you." He says, "Oh, I know that, and I know I definitely look at your opinion in the highest regard. However, there's this
Yeah.
intuition thing telling me that you should pursue this so that it doesn't
Haha.
go beyond
Yes.
it." He doesn't know how to explain it. He doesn't know what he can't produce data point. He can't. He knows it's illogical.
Yes.
However, there is that inner feeling that guides him and says, "I have to take care of this." And it seems like
Ah,
obsession to other people, but I don't know. Can argue both ways.
it is obsession because he is not listening to anybody else's suggestions or he's not really listening to reason. But at the same time, they actually don't get it. And Kirk is right. So it is obsession, but at the same time, it's well justified obsession. The others don't really understand what they're dealing with and they think Kirk is a little crazy until Spock says this is an intelligent creature. It's not just a simple cloud, it's not just a random event that's been happening. This is an actual creature and it feeds off blood. You see it killing all of those red shirts. And now, when you have confirmation that it is an actual living thing with intelligence and it knows what it's doing, that makes it so much more intense and actually quite frightening.
To start with, in the teaser, the mission is after Tritanium with an
Yes,
R, supposedly harder than Diamond, and that's what they're after.
yes.
However,
Haha.
they find that this planet is not entirely devoid of trouble. It has this weird smoke thingy, which is dichronium, right? That's the element that they.
Dichronium. Yes,
So that's the
dichronium.
second element that we hear. Dichronium
Yeah.
is something of a like a high atomic number lab made element,
Artificial.
usually artificial
Yes.
element usually, but they've never
Yes.
found that in nature, and looks like this creature seems to have it.
Yep. And it's occurring naturally for that creature. And it's able to mask it because if you just scan for dichironium on the planet's surface, you're not going to find it. The creature is able to shape shift in some form. Not that it can take a human form or anything, but it can mask its true nature, making it
Hmm.
virtually impossible to find. So that, I thought when Chekhov was searching for this creature using the ship scanners and they couldn't find anything, it was actually a very difficult situation for Kirk because now people are going to think that he's crazy. He's talking about this creature which they cannot find. It's not going to show up in the sensors. He says it's made out of dichronium, but they're scanning for dichronium and they can't find it. Kirk, it must have been an extraordinarily stressful situation for Kirk at that point. The creature decided to make an appearance with a flourish, and then everybody realized that what he said was right.
With the two guys dead and the third one very serious, was proof enough that there is something really funky going on the planet. They have the report from 11 years ago where
Yes.
USS Farragut is definitely affected by this creature. But that was light years away. So
Yes, he
it,
does say it's thousands of light years away. Yes.
rather a freak appearance, I would think, for something to have traveled so far so quickly. So in 11
Yes.
years' time, spanning 1,000 light years is going to be very, very difficult.
And it managed to run into the same person it ran into the last time, which was also quite a coincidence. Unfortunately, fortunately for the creature, that person happened to be Kirk. Anybody else would not have been able to handle it because they
They
wouldn't
will
have
just
the presence
probably
of mind. Yeah,
put a yellow sticker saying "Avoid dangerous creature ahead."
exactly.
It
And
had to
the
be Kirk.
stickers, yes, and it had to be Kirk. And creature had the absolute stupidity going to a planet where Kirk was present in.
Ah,
So it it's not
yeah.
as intelligent as it thinks, which is what it
Yes.
should.
So in the first act, he wants to get to something out of Rizzo, and Kirk says, "Can you wake him up just for me to talk to him?"
Yes.
Here is a tricky situation for McCoy because Now, this guy is a weak person right now because all his blood, at least red cells, are gone. He's trying to revive this guy as much as he can. However, his captain wants to get him up and can do his questioning in that kind of a state. So it starts off on a pretty weird note for McCoy and for us as an audience.
Yep. And honestly, that part where Kirk is insisting that Rizzo be woken up so that he can interrogate him, that was quite brutal. And Kirk was just so intent on finding this creature, he did not consider at that point that Rizzo might die. Or maybe he did realize that Rizzo might die and thought him expendable, but it was a little painful to watch that. He was constantly questioning him, and he wasn't gentle in that scene. He was, forcing Rizzo to answer, forcing him to think back on what happened and recall what he saw. And that's a side of Kirk we haven't really seen before. He's usually quite considerate of his crew.
And like McCoy says, he was actually putting words into Rizzo's mouth, right? So he knew,
Yes.
he was asking him, "Did you get that sweet odor? Did you perceive intelligence? Did you
Huh.
do this? Did you?" It was all more about he had already made up his mind that this is what is the answer, and he was sort of forcing that out of Rizzo's semi-conscious mouth, so to speak.
Yeah. He was kind of suggesting things to Rizzo and was just responding because he wasn't in a position to think on what happened anyway. He is half dead at that point. He is semi-conscious, and Kirk was constantly prompting him and giving him words to say to kind of confirm what he thought himself. That the fact that he was right is beside the point.
Yes. And now Spock also looks at the Farragut's tapes, his conclusions from that. In the first act, we get introduced to Ensign Garrowick for the first time as a
Yes.
security chief. And nice link between Rizzo and Garrowick because he says, "Oh, we went to the academic together." So
Yes,
there
he
is a
was a good
personal
friend.
stake, even, yes, from
Yeah.
straight away, Garrowick also has a personal touch to this one through his
Mm.
dad that we come to know later, but here presently is his friend Rizzo, whatever classmate Rizzo, who's dead because of the creature, and Garrowick has a stake there as well.
Took him a lot of self-control not to show much when they announced Rizzo's death. His face was so taut. He
Hmm.
could feel a lot of things. He was upset that his friend had died, obviously, and there was a personal stake. He's also very self-controlled. He would make a very good officer later on.
This point is when we notice that they have we should phase sorry, what is it called? Phaser 2, huh? The
Yeah,
type we
yeah.
see in
Yes, yes.
Devil in
That
the
is something
Deep,
different.
Devil in the Dark, Devil in the Dark. Yes, that's
Yes.
we see that here also. Kirk's hunch that this won't work. Probably
Ah,
that's why he's issued a phaser 2.
yes. Kirk feels that this creature is too powerful, but it also turns out to be way more powerful than he ever imagined.
Yes.
It's it's no point firing at it in any form. You can't attack it, you can't injure it, you can't make it disintegrate. It's absolutely no use. That he
and that
finds out much later. Yeah.
correct, and that leads Garrowick to the back to the planet with his landing party,
Mm,
and a disaster strikes one more time. So one red shirt dies, one is critical, and now
yes.
they come back with a dead man. So second, this is the where the plot thickens, right? So we find that a couple of landing parties have casualties,
Yes.
and now trying to pin. We discussed this scene already, which is
Yeah.
Kirk trying to pin it down on Garrowick and confined
Yep.
to quarters. That came as a surprise to everyone, saying he's confined
Yeah.
to quarters for what, freezing for a second.
Freezing for a second and not firing at the creature.
Hmm.
He, so he gets confined to quarters, and I think McCoy does point out that it was too harsh.
Every time Kirk does something over the top,
Yeah.
McCoy is the first one to point it out. I don't think Spock sees the seriousness of the situation. However, I think McCoy gets it immediately.
McCoy is very impulsive and very emotional. That is actually a plus point because when Kirk does things like this, he is able to counter him immediately. And
Hmm.
McCoy also does have a temper, and it's,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's needed, particularly when Kirk takes decisions like this, which are so blatantly unfair that he's confining this young ensign to his quarters for coming face to face with this monstrous creature and then freezing for 1 or 2 seconds, and then it gets to a point where he starts blaming himself. and
Yeah.
he loses his appetite. He's gone into some sort of deep trauma, and he's also trying to contain his frustration and his rage, and that actually causes him to throw that plate at his ventilation switches, and the creature that gives the creature a perfect opportunity to come into the Enterprise, which is, I don't think they examined that later though. It wasn't mentioned that the
Yeah.
creature was able to get in because of this.
Yeah, this is a good example of how even little things sort of add up, and somewhere
Yeah,
it's linked to another thing that happened in the story. So
yeah,
all the scenes were well connected. Turns out
yeah.
to be very important because now when Spock and Garavik are in the room where Spock is about to tell him that, oh, it's you don't have to be incriminating yourself. This is how the creature is and all that,
Mm.
and now Spock tries to play the hero by trying to stop it, switch it off, and turn the
Yeah,
pressure on the creature. But he can't because Garovic closed
yeah.
the or broke the switch.
Broke the
Possible.
switch. Yeah, and that was very lucky for Spock because his blood was green and the creature couldn't drain him of his red blood corpuscles. And it probably got sick trying to drain Spock of his blood, and all that Vulcan blood must have given it indigestion for all. So it just
And a
getting
bad
sucked back
taste in the
into,
mouth
yeah, very bad taste in the mouth. So
as the guy.
getting sucked back into the ventilation ducts must have been a huge relief for it.
Oh, so that's another thing that got linked also. Scotty, in his eagerness to tell the captain that we're ready to leave,
Yeah.
cleans the tube of all the radioactive stuff and is ready. But that
Yeah.
happens to be the exact vent that the creature actually tries to enter the Enterprise. So, two things that favored this the cleaning of the
Mm.
tubes is that Scotty really wants to get going to Yorktown because it's a highly critical mission, and
Yes.
the creature enters, and there was no way it would have entered the chambers, but it did because Garavik was confined to quarters. Why? Because Kirk spent him to the planet and made him the victim. The Farragut episode happened 11 years ago, so it's tightly linked. It's unbelievable how everything is important in this episode.
Yes, it was so well done. Even the smallest infraction or mistake has huge consequences. Everything is linked, including Garavik throwing the plate and getting the vents open. The creature makes use of everything. You make the slightest mistake and it's able to exploit that. You hesitate for a moment, it is going to attack you at double speed. You leave the vents open, it's going to come in and drain everyone's blood. I think the biggest mistake it made was going to a planet where Kirk happened to be. And that was not very
Mm,
smart. That was not very
right.
smart.
No, in fact, even a tiny scene like Christine bringing Garavik
Oh, yeah.
his dinner. This is also something that I enjoyed. She brings in a tape from some sea creature or something like that. She threatens him, saying, "Hey, McCoy gave an order. You eat this or else." That was very nice.
No, she was so well characterized in this episode, and she had the sense of humor to carry things forward. She knew when to
Mm.
threaten her patients into complying with orders. She knows when to keep her good nature up and when to take things seriously. And I think she was very, very well drawn out in this episode.
Yeah. She says this has a log with just one word: eat.
Eat, yes, and
or,
that's it.
or you're going to be hauled to the sick bay and fed in. All right, I'll eat then.
That's what she knows how to deal with this young guy who refuses to eat. So if she says this, he's going to eat because he cannot
And
resist orders. Yeah.
she is also well informed about the status of what is going on, right? Is the creature going to attack us? Maybe. Is the captain crazy to go after this? Maybe. She goes on.
Maybe, yeah.
She's up to date on everything that's happening in the ship.
She knows everything that's happening and she's keeping a level head. She's not going to act all jittery and anxious and freak out the Garovic even further. She's just doing her job in a very good way, being very reassuring, and
Mm.
she will harbor no nonsense from anybody. So if you are going to talk about not eating, she's not going to have any of that. She brought you food, you will eat. That's it.
Yeah. So then finally Spock declares that this is indeed a creature because it's
Yeah.
intelligent. It turned around and attacked us. That's
Yes.
entered into fourth act territory. And McCoy apologizes, saying that, hey, I did make a mistake.
Ah.
Kirk is the only one who's acting on intuition here. And it's
Yes.
very difficult to convey what you're thinking because you're purely playing your gut, right? You
Exactly.
cannot say this is why I'm doing. You can give all sorts of reasons, excuses, but it's not exactly what you're feeling, and that feeling comes about when it happens. McCoy apologizing is also important for this because it closes the loop on the fact that it's just not pure obsession, but it is acting on intuition.
That was a very well done scene where McCoy apologizes. The apology was short and very McCoy like, and it was very apt. And it was done a grudgingly because he's made a mistake and he has to admit to that. But he
Yeah.
did it, so that shows his character in a very good light. That the issue with this creature is you can't really pinpoint what's wrong with it until you see what it can do. It's not just some mindless amoeba, it's an actual living alien that can do a lot of things. It can think, it can attack. And I think it took that one particular scene where it turned around and came back at the Enterprise for the rest of the crew to realize that Kirk was right. Their lives
Mm,
had to be put on the line, and then they realized that what Kirk was saying was absolutely right. This is an intelligent creature and quite
correct.
malicious and vicious.
Yeah, vicious is more like it. Yeah. In fact, Spock says this creature is so sophisticated, you couldn't have fired at it, no matter
At
what
all.
you at all. I mean, no matter what
Mm.
your best efforts, your best precision, it wouldn't have helped because this creature is like that. He is also worried that captain being obsessed is not a good thing for the ship, for the mission. So somehow he wants to pull that out of Kirk's head, and he tries to
Yeah.
do that. Of course, Kirk had his own ways of deflecting. It says, "Okay, go talk to the other crew member, not me." So
Mm. He
implying
snaps
that
at him there.
you go talk to Garwick. No, I don't need this. I'm okay, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I'm okay and I don't want to hear this nonsense and you have no business talking to me and I'm not going to accept it. Will you please go away? So he's Kirk is a little abrasive. But
Mm.
even he has to acknowledge after a point that what Spock was saying was absolutely right. Have done.
Right.
There's nothing Kirk could have done 11 years ago. There's nothing Garrowick could have done right now.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
he has to admit it finally that you cannot attack this creature unless you have some sort of sophisticated matter, antimatter blast. This is the only way to kill it.
Yeah. Finally gets him back on duty, and Garwick is
Yes.
very happy to do that. That brings Kirk figuring out that the creature wants to go back home because
Spawn.
that's the
Yes.
with the fragrance he can detect it, and I don't know, probably his interaction. It's because of the fragrance he knows that it wants to go back home, and now it's down to what is this 48 hours rendezvous. He tells
Yeah.
town that okay, now I'm on another mission.
Yes.
This is the mission that we have to care about. The USS Enterprise has to care about, and now they
Yes.
do the whole bait thing.
Have to do the whole bait thing, prepare the blood vials for this creature, and eventually kill it. I was a little surprised when they announced that the creature is going home to spawn because we weren't given any indication that this thing could reproduce. And it was
Mm-mm.
very strange to suddenly hear that it's going to spawn like bacteria and create more creatures. And
Yeah.
as we see in many other Star Trek episodes, this creature is the last of its kind.
Yes, it's exactly like that.
Yeah,
That
there were quite a few, yes, and there were so many of them with just one of them left, and this
yes.
creature fits into that category. It's just one of one, and it wants to spawn, but Kirk decides there's no spawning happening. That's it. No, nothing doing.
Unless it can help with the tritanium mining, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Unless it's a good pet, it's not going to do any spawning. It's
Yeah, exactly. So the bait is taken up prematurely, and now they have
yeah.
a fist fight. Kirk and Garrowick as to who's going to be the human bait.
To be the hero now, one of them
Uh,
has to sacrifice themselves. Yeah.
Garrowick does pack a whack at his captain, striking
It
your
is.
superior officer.
Yes, and Kirk at that scene, from being so completely unreasonable with Gary, he goes to the other extreme and says, "I understand why you punched me. Why?" it's It goes from one extreme to the other, and then forgives Garrowick for that infraction. I mean, that could have got them into real trouble. His that fist
Hmm.
fight, it could have delayed things to a dangerous degree because this creature was approaching them. And at that point, Kirk decides it's okay that Garrowick hit him.
I have a theory
Yeah.
that maybe this tall story, promise of the tall story at the end,
Yes.
is
Yeah.
probably this, that he packed a punch
It
Daddy
could be.
Garrowick's, gave him a left cross, and now we're even. That's probably the tall story he's going to tell him.
Yeah, I was exactly like you. Maybe I punched him in the nose and then I got away with it. So it's
No
it's probably
court
the tall story.
martial for you because I did the same thing to your dad. That's it.
I mean, everybody's punched and everything is fine. So
Kirk won, Garrowick won. That's it, done.
Kirk won, Garrett won, and yeah, you can't court martial all that. So
So there's the last minute tense scene with the transporter. A
yes,
lot of empty stuff happening. There's no noise. There's nobody beaming on board. And finally, McCoy is very unhappy with Spock and Scott, saying, "Come on, guys, you should do something. Where are they? Well, what's going on?"
yes, yes, and Spock is being very Spock. He's very calm and he's switching the wiring. He gets him back, and he's not going to accept any nonsense about divine intervention. He did it, not God.
Scott says, "Thank heaven," and this guy says, "Oh, I don't see why deities have to be involved in this.
I did it. Why are you giving my
It is across
to a
me."
deity? No, yeah, it is me, all me. You can't. There's no deity involved here.
So McCoy goes the other end and says, "All right, pitchforks and pointed ears it is."
Yes. In his typical McCoy fashion, he really got Spock there because usually when McCoy says something, Spock has some sort of a witty comeback, and this time he didn't.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So
Yes.
that was Obsession. And what about our likes and dislikes? What did you like and dislike about this episode, Parvati?
So I liked all of it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Oh,
And there were so many intense moments, and the alien creature was frightening. That was the effect they intended, and it worked really well. I absolutely loved how even the little details were woven so well into the story. And really intriguing, and it kept you at the edge of your seat throughout. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. What about you?
I think it's a wonderful episode, and I think this is the best example of an episode that makes up the whole Star Trek, the original series sort of lore,
Yep.
and is one of those
Yes,
exemplary episodes.
absolutely.
Some of the
Yeah.
major points that I liked were the whole idea of green blood in Vulcan veins. Something we are
Yes.
not introduced to before. We know that this
Yeah.
guy is very different in physiology before we
Ah,
have come across that. But knowing that this green blood and all that copper based blood, so gives us
yep.
some more details. Kirk's character has been explored very well from the word go. He
Yeah.
has a serious intent in all this.
Yes,
McCoy and
absolutely.
Spock, they're
Hmm.
not just gaffing away here, they're not behind the back of the captain conspiring, but they actually have the best interests of the ship and the captain in mind. Extremely professional, clinical in their job. They go the way they would do their job. I liked Scotty's pleading, saying that, "Come on, I just polished the whole thing. It's so squeaky clean, and you're making it go warp 8. Can we not go at warp
Yeah.
8?"
Could we slow down? The whole thing is going to explode, and then
You could see the pain in his face. Like, "Oh my god, what are you doing to my ship?"
yes, you are being so unreasonable and you're being so stupid going at warp 8, going after a cloud. And would you
Yeah.
please slow down? And finally, Kirk gets it and he slows down to
I
quiet.
I like the character of young Garrowick. He had done
Oh,
it
yes,
very well. I
extremely well.
and it was a necessary character to bring out different things in Kirk's character. He's a good support character in this entire story. So,
He's an
um,
excellent character. That was so heartwarming. He is finally
exactly. So
let off the hook.
he
Yes.
just leaps out of that scene. You can see him
Yes.
just wanting to go back and do his best. So
Yes, absolutely. And he's so professional that he's not holding anything against Kirk. And he has a lot, that character has a lot of promise.
yes, absolutely, I agree with that. Dislikes, there are nothing except the fact that I felt the story wise seems like a
Mm,
template to me. You have this creature who's about to spawn, and either Kirk decides to keep it or destroy it.
yeah.
So seems like a very, very templatey kind of at a very high level, at a story level, granular level, the final details. It's absolutely engaging and very well done. But at a
Yep.
higher arc level, probably I see some kind of a pattern emerging, but nothing to
Yes.
be worried about or anything. I think it's
Yeah.
fine the way it was. That brings us to the hypothetical question: if the screenwriter were to appear in this podcast, what would we ask them to explain or to change?
So I don't think I would ask him to change anything, but maybe I'd like a little bit of explanation on how they suddenly came to this conclusion that the creature would spawn. That was a little surprising, and
Mm,
it didn't spawn for 11 years, and it just traveled space for over 1,000 light years, and that's a long distance. Does it have a lifespan of a million years or something that it doesn't spawn that quickly? What
mm.
about you?
Me, I like the concept of this gaseous cloud creature, because creatures
Yeah,
you would think are walking humanoid or something at least similar to what humans think of life or creatures to be, which is why
exactly.
Spock, even the open-minded Spock, had trouble surmising that this could be a creature. So
Yep.
it took him a while. So I think it's an interesting concept overall and beautiful
Mm.
execution. Congratulations to the screenwriter, dazzling
Yeah.
display of excellent lessons for us future sci-fi writers. So,
Absolutely.
so that's how I would end this. I would ask them.
Absolutely.
All right, great.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, Parvati. This is great analysis, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you and bye.
Bye, everyone.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening to the podcast Enterprise. Please do share your reviews with us, and please share this podcast with any of your writing friends or trickies. Live long and prosper.